forward to your comments and discussion during the session. Please feel free to ask questions. We'd like it to be interactive, and if you've got questions as we go through, I'm sure Lance won't object to stopping and addressing them and moving forward that way. Thanks, Lance.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Lance.
All right. I thought you guys went to sleep already. That can't possibly be that boring.
Not yet.
I need to start. Okay. We're going to talk about the data warehousing and how vMarket and Cognos work together to do that. How many people are right now contemplating a data warehouse project of some kind? Don't be shy. Okay. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the scope of those data warehousing projects that you might be working on, and how you might be able to use Universe, Hyperstar, and the Cognos products to accomplish that to that end. Okay. When you talk about whether or not you're even going to do data warehousing, you notice right now that the business needs of most companies are related to their ability to gather the information that they have and analyze it. And a lot of times you have a lot of information, but your ability to get down to the root of that data to analyze it is often hampered by your inability to have the correct tools. And we think that the Cognos tool set is great when it comes to doing just that. And basically we're talking about, this last quote here from Gartner Group talks about a small number of analysts spending 100% of their time analyzing data. Instead, they will spend 10% of their time analyzing data themselves using business intelligence tools. That's the key. The idea is now you want to put the power of the tools on everyone's desktop, so that at the lowest level of accountability, people can get the information that they need. And that is the essence of a data warehouse. You had a question? Oh, okay. So a simple definition, a business case for data warehousing, it helps turn data into a competitive tool. That's the underlying reason for doing it at all. The key for data warehousing is getting a good return on investment. You'll hear ROI mentioned all the time in any articles or anything you read about data warehousing. Because the key there is you've got the information in your organization, and they say, you know, a person's decisions are only as good as their information. So the key in the competitive environment that you're working in is to have the best information you can possibly have. And the key to that is having the proper tools and the proper data available to you. Some of the data definitions when you talk about data warehousing I think are important. The first two are really important, the difference between a data warehouse and a data mart. Now the key here, when most people think originally about data warehousing, you think of some far-flung project that's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to put together and a whole team of experts necessary to make it work. When in fact, most cases for small organizations, or small to medium-sized organizations, what you really have is some cache of data or some part of your application or some part of your universe of information that you really want to go after. So it's possible to create a smaller sized data warehouse, a more focused data warehouse, which in this case by definition of the industry is a data mart. And it's that area where vMark and Cognos are concentrating currently on the data mart, where very quickly you can get up and running with access to your information using the tool. Some other definitions. When you talk about business intelligence, many people think of reporting as the idea behind having the tools and getting to your information. But business intelligence takes that reporting idea just a little bit further, because the idea there, the way the term is designed, is to make you think about not only having the data reported out and looking through green bar reports and flipping to the last page and looking at your totals, but actually gaining some intelligence from your data by being able to do things like drill down and slice and dice and things in terms that you'll hear as you look at the Cognos presentation. And it's all about getting true information out of your data. Another one is online analytical processing. I don't know how many people are familiar with that term. When you're designing, or when most people design their applications, they've been designed primarily for transaction processing, for people to put data in, and in the most efficient and the most effective method possible. Where data warehouse comes into play is for what's called OLAP, or online analytical processing. The idea being, if you were to design your application or design the way you work or the data store backwards, from the point of view of what data do I want to get out? Now, how would I design it differently if that was what I wanted to do, if that was my purpose? So an online analytical processing situation is where the data has been massaged, the data has been organized for a system that's designed specifically for analysis of data, to get the data out and to get the kind of information that you need. And then one of the last terms here, data mining, that goes directly at being able to infer from the information that you've been able to obtain from your data some correlations that before that you didn't see or didn't notice that they existed. It's seemingly unrelated data, and be able to put that together and come to some kind of conclusion. Some other definitions for you. One I want to concentrate on is transformation or scrubbing. The reason we want to mention this is because you've got your data store out there. All of you, I assume, are using Universe. So you've got your data out there, and again, you design that to get the data in. Well, in many cases, there could be some good data, there's some bad data, there's some data that may be misorganized or disorganized, and as a key part of your data warehousing strategy is to take that data and transform it into something you can use. And that transformation and scrubbing process is one of the key processes for creating a data warehouse. It's a very important piece, and if done correctly, will lead to the ultimate success of the project. Now, when you talk about online transaction processing, again, the process of getting the data in versus a data warehouse, you see some of the major differences. For instance, the first one, the online transaction processing, contains current values. In most cases, your transaction system is designed to go directly against live current data as your production system. Where in a data warehouse, the majority of the time, and I'd say almost probably 90% of the time, what you're looking at is some corporate archive of data. You've taken some snapshot of the data that exists in your organization, and you've massaged that, and it's that you're going to look at. So that's one of the differences. Another difference is the structure or format of the data. Normally on your transaction side, is very complicated, the structure, because it's designed to work with the underlying programs and underlying procedures for calculations, etc. Again, designed to get data in and to do the normal day-to-day processing. Where your warehouse system is designed around subject areas and it's organized so that it'll be accessible by the common user. Any questions so far? Okay, you got some data warehousing experts. Okay. Why data warehousing? Some of you have said you've made the decision to go to data warehousing, and then some people are a little shy about putting them in. Well, maybe I have and maybe I haven't. Well, the compelling reason is obviously to gain an advantage by putting your information to work. For the same reason you put your money into stocks and bonds or bank accounts, is they say the best way to get rich is to let your money make you rich. Right? Let your money work for you. Well, in this competitive advantage of business, your key asset is currently the information that you have. So you have to put that information to work for you. And the best way to do that is to have the ability to analyze it, be able to get the kind of information from the raw data that you currently have in your system that will give you that competitive advantage. When you talk about, again, that basic data warehousing, the data warehousing you've read about in the magazines or in the trade press, most of the times you think about this $3.5 billion software market. And that's what Gartner has predicted the data warehousing arena will be, because everybody is beginning to think about this particular subject because it's important to the underlying success of their business. But what happens is, due to one of the things mentioned here, the lack of management commitment, and the lack of understanding of data warehousing, some of the initial data warehousing projects have not met with the greatest of success because they're very complicated solutions. and without the complete commitment of everyone in the organization to make it successful, they haven't done well. So what we found is that by concentrating on the smaller segment of the data warehousing arena, like the data mart that we talked about earlier, the success rate can be increased dramatically. Meta Group did a study of about 250 IT professionals just to ask the same question I asked you when we came in. How many people are looking at data warehousing? And some of the information that you get back suggests that the ones of you who are beginning to look at that are looking in the right direction. As many as it says, with 32% of those people were within 6 months going to implement a data warehouse, and so 41% of them are currently in some limited production of a data warehousing solution. As I mentioned earlier, quick return on investment. That's the key to your data warehousing solution. Because there's some upfront investment involved, you've got the data scrubbing involved, you've got the investment in resources and software. The key is being able to get an immediate return from your data warehouse. And as you can see, the ROI average after 3 years of implementing a data warehouse is 401% for standard data warehouse and 533% for a data mart. In my experience, certainly using a tool like PowerPlay, once you've demonstrated it for a user, using their data in their organization, invariably you will see the light bulbs go off in the back of their head. And I like to make the analogy to like a cellular phone. How many people in here have a cellular phone? Okay. Now you probably fought tooth and nail against getting one initially. What does it cost? What is it going to do for me? But then once you get one, you can't imagine having lived life without one. And the data mart works the same way. You thought that you were making your decisions based on good information, certainly the best information that you had. You have smart people working for you, and you asked them questions, and they gave you answers, and they all seemed to make sense, and you made your business decisions based on them. When you begin using these kinds of analysis tools, it can make the kinds of comparisons that you need to make between last year's performance and this year's performance, the kind of comparisons between perhaps what your competitors are doing and what you're doing. You begin to see the wealth of data that was out there and the kind of information that was out there that you heretofore didn't have or weren't using effectively. And you begin to make better decisions. As I say, the light bulbs go off, and you wonder how you managed thus far without that kind of information. One of the things that is also all abuzz currently, if you've lived anywhere other than in Cave in the last couple of years, you've heard about the World Wide Web. And both Cognos and VMark are working diligently towards creating a clear strategy towards being able to use the intranet infrastructure or the internet infrastructure as a part of the reporting, data warehousing, and business intelligence arena. I've read a press release from Cognos recently about their formulation of their internet strategy as it relates to being able to access their tools from popular web browsers. So that is a direction that both companies are headed. Definition of VMark's universal warehouse. Provide a turnkey solution that addresses the explicit needs of small to medium-sized businesses or departmental business units for business intelligence. Again, the key there, rather than trying to be all things to all people and create a humongous environment for enterprise-wide data processing, we at VMark are looking towards the small and medium-sized businesses and going after the data mart segment of the marketplace. A very focused approach on particular segments of your organization and of your business. Again, one of the most important parts here is we're talking about the entire solution. You'll hear me mention several times the Cognos products, or PowerPlay, or Impromptu, or Universe, or Hyperstar. But no one product is what results in a successful data warehouse. The key there is providing a total solution. And as part of that total solution is the analysis of your data structure, the analysis of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then along with the tools and the expertise that vMark brings to the table, it's there that you get a functional and efficient data warehousing solution. Questions? What's the vMark philosophy? The right approach means the right results. And there's some key points, and they're all up there. Rapid implementation, again, so that you can get immediate return from the information. We recognize that it's a serious commitment. Commitment of resources, commitment of time, commitment of effort, and we want to make sure you get rapid return. We want to make sure that decision makers are motivated so that they can be productive, more productive sooner. We want to make sure that the people that are going to use the data warehouse as well as the people that are implementing are motivated to that end. Okay? Make sure that the product is promoted within and it grows. You've got everybody behind it, everybody understands why we're doing it, what we intend to accomplish. Again, it makes it more successful. And then the last part here, the data quality equals the ability to drive the business. Good data, garbage in, garbage out is the key. And that's where that data scrubbing and transformation process comes in. So the key to the vMark solution is focus on delivering the right solution for the right price, including products, consulting services, etc. Very messy slide, but the idea that we're trying to convey here is that there are some key steps to creating a data warehouse. The steps here are listed as strategic planning. I don't know if you can see, it's kind of small. Project analysis, design and construction, testing, education. All of that goes into creating a successful data warehouse. It's more than connecting some tool to some back-end product. Because you're talking about creating an entity in your business that's going to allow your business to grow successfully and allow you to get good information and proper organization at the beginning, as well as throughout the entire process, is going to determine your level of success. So vMark and our consulting group can help you with going through this entire process as you begin to build your data warehouse solution. What are the components? Okay. One is implementation services. The key there is, as we mentioned, the consulting services, people being able to understand your business requirement, and then working with your MIS staff to design the solution and project manage, as well as implementation. At that point, we tailor the solution to you. Which products did you need, how you might need those products implemented, and then along with the software components, like Cognos Business Intelligence tools, Universe, and Hyperstar, we're able to create your data warehousing solution. How does that solution look from an organizational perspective? Well, you've got your operational data, either in your Universe database or some other existing database, and through the use of Hyperstar as your middleware, you're able to connect to your business intelligence tools. And this is one way of doing it, is going directly at your production data. One of the more popular solutions, and a solution that I think most people who think of data warehousing lean to, is where what you do is you take the information from your production system and you distill it into what we call the Universe warehouse, where you've taken that segments of your business, you've taken segments of your information, you've organized it, as we say, in a way that's optimized for getting the information out that you need. It's been reorganized and restructured for that purpose. That data warehouse is updated periodically, and then it's that warehouse that the Hyperstar middleware piece goes against, and it's that data that your tools relate to.
So Vince, that's a separate system, is it?
Yes, this is a separate system, usually a separate machine. In many cases, I think as we go forward towards the future, you can see this as being perhaps a Windows NT server running Universe 9.
And typically probably just 10 or 15 users, like a smaller number of users.
That's going to depend upon the organization, but the key there is that you design a data warehouse for what you intend to accomplish. Maybe if you want it for just line managers, or you want it for executives, and you create a system that's appropriate for that. Talk about the client tools. Obviously, for the Universal Warehouse, you need query and reporting. So you do standard reports, ad hoc reports, and your access is done for your Hyperstar. From the analysis side, you need multi-dimensional analysis tools. And Hyperstar allows the Cognos tools, which are SQL-based tools, to understand and relate to your multi-dimensional environment that you get with Universal and Hyperstar. You need high-speed graphical navigation and drill-down tools. How many people have seen some kind of slice and dice drill-down OLAP analysis tool before? What tools have you seen? Anyone? You don't remember the names of them? Okay. I was just curious as to what other tools you've seen. Once you see PowerPlay, and as I understand, you may actually have an opportunity to see the latest version of PowerPlay, whose beta just finished days ago, and I have an advanced copy of the product. And I think it's very impressive, and I think after speaking to the Cognos people, I think that's what you're going to see today. And I think you'll be very impressed based on what you've probably seen before in other products, the kind of capability that is available to you in a form that's easy for the end user to manipulate. When you talk about the tools, this is a simple chart just designed to show you which tools handle which segments of the data warehousing and business analysis project. And for instance, if you look at this chart, you've got tabular reporting, simplified reporting, multidimensional analysis, and business analysis. And you see Impromptu plays a major role in that. That's the query and reporting tool. And it plays a major role in all four areas. Then you have products like PowerPlay's Explorer and Reporter, which in its current form, the latest version, are all one tool now for multidimensional analysis. Then you'll see something, perhaps, at least I hope you will today, called PowerPlay Portfolio, which I think is important for the real top-line managers. And I'll describe briefly what that is. Many of the managers right now don't want to go into, or you're a president or vice president when you're doing the OLAP analysis, they don't want to go directly into some tool where they have to click a whole lot of buttons and things like that to move around. What Portfolio allows you to do is it creates a paradigm similar to that of a PowerPoint presentation, not too much unlike the one you're seeing now, where I just click a button and I go to the next slide. Well, PowerPlay's Portfolio is an OLAP 0.20 client and server product. If you don't know what OLAP 2.0 means, basically any other Windows product can now be made a part of any other Windows product. So you can be in more than one product at a time and not really notice. And the idea there is that you can take your reports from both PowerPlay, from Impromptu, from spreadsheets and other things, and embed them in this slideshow-like presentation so that your executives can then just flip through their reports and flip through those slides, and if necessary, can go into the products that created them, but can get that kind of information without having a familiarity with the actual tools and some of the capabilities that they have, so it makes that easy. And talk about what each piece of the puzzle provides. Universe, there is your query-optimized database, the backbone of the data warehousing solution. The database is designed specifically to get the kind of information that you need out quickly, effectively, and efficiently. Hyperstar provides the transparent access to the Universe data. Most of the tools that are available on the market don't understand, for the most part, the multidimensional nature or the nested nature of the Universe database. Hyperstar handles that through the Hyperstar ODBC, allows the SQL-based tools to understand that multidimensional structure. So you're able to leave your database as it was in terms of its structure and take advantage fully of that multidimensional environment, but using the common, ordinary SQL-based tools available to you in the market. Now we talk about how many VARs in here? Most end users? Okay, great. So your idea of a data warehouse is keep is, number one, to solve a business problem. You have a segment of your organization or segment of your data that you understand is important, you understand is key to getting at solving your business needs, and it's there that you focus your data warehouse. Business problems from things like product, service, maintenance, and the idea is to fully train and empower your end users to be able to get at the lowest level of accountability. I say that often about that lowest level of accountability because in today's competitive environment, what's going to make the difference, aside from customer service, what's going to make the difference between the success and failure perhaps of your organization as each of the individuals within your organization having the right information with which to do their job better, smarter, faster. And the key to that is having access to the kind of information that they want. They shouldn't have to go back to MIS to write reports. They shouldn't wonder, well, I know that information is in the database somewhere, and how can I get it? And struggle through that process. If they have tools on their desktop that allows them to get the kind of day-to-day information that they need to make the quick, efficient day-to-day decisions, the overall organization as a whole will be more competitive and in essence more successful. Just some examples of some end-user solutions that we've talked about or that we've done in the past. We've begun this whole data warehousing strategy has come primarily from some work that we've done in the UK. How do you get data warehouse implemented? What's available to you? Primarily, we work in stages. Now, what we've done as we've begun to introduce the data warehousing subject to our VARs and begin to introduce it to end users, they're all at various stages of implementation or at various stages of need in terms of data warehousing. So some of the things that you can do differently, like first of all, we can start with a simple proof of concept. It takes about 3 to 5 days. The focus there is on a quick deliverable. To take the tools, to take the database that you already have, and focus those tools against it to show you what the capabilities are of the data warehousing solution. Then once you've seen that, you can then begin to explore in your own minds or explore in your own organizations how you might want to go forward. Another level, perhaps after you've gone here, is to do an actual prototype of your data. The first one, you'll notice no data warehouse is actually created. You're going against your production data. Here, there's no data scrubbing involved. We're not trying to clean up the data as we would for a formal data warehouse, but the idea is to do a little optimization and begin to see what kind of results you can get from the data warehousing solution. Somewhere in 5 to 10 days. Another is something we call a quick win pilot, 10 to 30 days. The idea there is that we provide a couple of reports, we do some data scrubbing, to do a little more analysis and design. Again, the idea here is to demonstrate the different components of a full data warehouse and how you might benefit from it. And then we have your departmental pilot, 30 to 90 days, building a fully functional data warehouse or data mart for a particular user area and the things that go along with that. So we work on end user reports, and the project's impacted by the number of elements or the number of reports and amount of scrubbing involved. That's basically how much consulting time you need and how much effort is going to be involved based on the kind of reports that you make. And then the last one, being an enterprise-wide project. 90 days plus. The idea is to incorporate all the customer's data warehousing needs and all the things that go along with that. So it involves some significant strategic planning, and all the implementation is accomplished through a phased rollout approach. You can't do it all at one time. You begin to feed it a little bit at a time. So, if you understand the data warehouse concept, and as you begin to look at the tools, if you're impressed with what you see and its ability, or perhaps you come up with some ideas in your own mind about how you might implement this in your organization, well, what do you do next? So some of the things we talk about here is the providing a lower entry point for your solution. So we're not talking about a big dollar investment, we're talking about just some consulting time, etc. And the key that we want you to do is first choose some critical problem area in your organization. Begin to think about what it is you might want to do. Begin to think about some area that you could get some quick return, some area or organization where perhaps you've been curious about the kinds of success that you would have, or maybe the not so much success of area you want to turn around. And it's that area that we focus on in creating a data warehousing solution. Any questions?
Vince,
Sure.
can you give us some examples of how other companies have used data warehousing? Like, whatever industry it is.
Okay, doesn't matter. You're talking about with VMark?
Yeah?
Actually, we've just begun to put many of those together. Most of them are in project phase at this time. I don't think we have one completed yet. I'm going to New Jersey tomorrow to work on one for a company that is they're a book publisher, and what they primarily want to use their data warehousing for is to be able to analyze how their different customers are performing in relation to one another. Because they're a publisher, well, they work for publishers, and they have a Savar that has an application related to publishers. And what they want to give those publishers the ability to do is to determine, what's being sold, where it's being sold, how it's being sold, more as a performance monitor. That's the key. One of the things you can get out of that slice and dice environment, and you'll see it when you begin to look at PowerPlay, is you can take your data and divide it up into dimensions. You can begin to turn and twist the data to look at it from perspectives that you may not have thought of before. Compare, how this region is performing against this particular region during this particular span of time. How this particular project has performed in the last 5 quarters, in this particular segment of the business, in this particular region, etc. So it's that kind of flipping and turning analysis that to do with green bar reports would be relatively impossible. That's available in a data warehousing solution. And those are the kinds of projects that people are working with. Sir?
What sort of tools do you have in the transformation and data cleansing area? Because we did a small data mart, and that's by far the biggest part of the effort is cleaning up the data before it gets there.
Absolutely. Right now we are working on those kinds of tools. I'm not familiar with all of the details and the background technical end of things. But I do understand that that's a question that comes up often, and that our consulting group is working with the technical staff and creating, as we get more experience in how the universe databases have been designed and what you as end users are trying to do with the data mart, and we're working on tools to make that process easier. We have some now, and we're working on more tools to make it more automated for that cleansing process. But it's a very tedious process, and in many cases, there is no golden button that you can press that's going to make it happen. In many cases, it's a lot of just grunt work in looking to see what's in the data and pulling it out. Any other questions about anything?
Can you give an example of dirty data?
Oh, there are some easy examples. Let's say when you're putting in addresses. Some people, you might put in something as simple as putting addresses New York as NY. Some might be, if you don't have the proper data validation, some people might put in the whole word or the whole name. Well, then when you go to do queries against the database, you say, give me everything in New York. Depending on what you use, will depend on the kind of data you get back. Okay? Those are some of the data type things. And then you have other simple things like let's see, some organizational issues. You've got different data structures. You've got different tables with similar information, but with different data structures, where the dates might be formatted differently in this particular file, or this particular segment of your database as different from another segment of your database. And your ability to compare them or do some date calculation on them might be different. So you may have to go through your data and change that kind of formatting so that you can make the proper comparisons of your data. And then some of the other things about dirty data is not so much that the data is bad or that the data is not formatted properly. It's just it's not organized in a way that makes it easy to get the data out. The data is not indexed in a way that makes it easy to do the reporting and analysis. So much of the time, that's a major process. It's reorganizing the data, reorganizing the data structure so that you can get the information out quicker and more efficiently. Sir?
It's on the subject of return on investment. You gave us some fairly specific figures. If we're faced with attempting to justify a project to a company or to a department or whatever, what hints would you give us as far as being able to quantify return on investment for these people?
What I would say to begin to look at first is once you've chosen the area that you're working in, or the area that, let's say you want to use it primarily for sales analysis. That's the area you want to concentrate your data warehouse and your data mart on. One of the ways of quantifying it is understanding what the success has been so far, what kind of information you have had so far, and begin to look at where the cost savings might come in. Let's see, it's a hard, obviously you can tell by how I'm talking about it, it's hard to quantify in terms of dollars and cents outside of having put together some kind of prototype and begun to see how the differences in the information that you had before versus the information that you have now might help you make better decisions.
But you gave us some very specific figures. They must have been based on something.
Right, they've come from the industry, those are industry analysis figures, and basically I can't tell you how they arrived at them.
Oh, okay.
But what they were saying is once the data warehouse has been implemented, for instance, let's say in a sales area or in a sales analysis area, they've done a survey of the organizations that have done it and said, well, how much have your sales increased over the time from the time you started your data warehouse till now?
So you're gonna take the credit entirely on the basis of the information system for any increase in sales.
Well, you probably can't take it completely.
You see what I'm trying to do here?
Oh,
Vince?
certainly.
I'm not
Certainly.
trying to ask you to justify. I'm asking you if you've got any hints for us to help quantify the justification for doing this kind of thing.
Oh, I understand the question
You know what I mean?
completely. And it is an area that it's a very difficult area to go into, to be able to say, well, here's the significant investment that we're going to make in organizing this data, doing all this data cleansing, and well, give me some hard dollars as to what this is going to save me. Well, that's often very difficult to do at the beginning. It's one of those things where you have to
It's pretty much when we have to do it, though, Vince.
Oh, I agree. I agree. So what it involves in terms of being able to justify it is being able to look at the kinds of information that you have available, what the cost savings might be in terms of the kind of reporting that you do now, and having the users have the ability to get the reports themselves and not have to go through the MIS backlog. There's a certain cost savings related to that. And then within each of the organizations that the data warehouse is plugged into, the managers in that organization, you kind of have to ask open-ended questions like, what the value is to them if they can get better information, if they can get more focus on a particular area of their business, what might that be worth to them? Same thing like kind of projecting your sales over a year at the beginning of the year. Well, you've got some idea of what you might do. You know who your customers might be, but some of them, you have to talk to and determine that whole forecasting process. It's a very similar process. There aren't any finite methods of saying, on this day, we're going to save this amount of money. It's all based on the kind of information that you have and what you think the advantages are going to be to you in having more qualified and better information. And I think, given that argument, managers can see, certainly after an initial prototype, or certainly after even a basic demonstration of how the tools work and how the data works, as I said, the light bulbs go off almost immediately in terms of seeing how I wish I could have analyzed a certain segment of my business in another way, which is why we start with prototypes in organizations. We say, give me a segment of your business, and then we'll do a prototype to show you that you've been making decisions based on information that may or may not have been complete. And once you see that, I think it's very easy for managers to make the next leap and say, this could potentially save me money, this could potentially be important to me, exactly how much in terms of dollars and cents we'll figure out over time. But I can see relatively quickly that there is some advantage, certainly more advantage than what I've got now. Other questions? I know you guys have millions of questions. I know you do. Okay. There are no other questions. Then what we'd like to do is get the tool guys in to show you exactly how it works. The Cognos people will talk about their strategy and talk about the tools themselves. And I think when you begin to see them, you'll understand exactly what we're talking about and the true power of having access to that kind of information on a daily basis.
And in order to facilitate that, I think we're going to have to change some of the equipment. Well, we take about a 10-minute break, help yourself some refreshments, use the facilities, and we'll start in about 10 minutes. We're going to get Steve back out here. Thanks, Michael. Give Steve as much time as possible to go through not only talking about the business intelligence piece, but also go through the presentation. One of his colleagues, one of the technical people, is going to come in and demonstrate the product to you, or to us, I should say, and make sure that we have enough time for questions and that sort of period. Steve is a sales manager for Cognos on the business intelligence side of the industry at Cognos, and without further ado, I'll let him talk about where the technology is and where it's going in the next segment. Thanks, Steve.
Great. Thanks. I will apologize in advance if some of my slides got lost. I've got a wonderful new Pentium, but it happens to be a Super VGA with an 800 by 600 screen, and the palette doesn't support that, so I had to do some playing with it, and we'll see what happens. What I want to talk about today is, first of all, do my best, and I might ask you to help me out in terms of defining what business intelligence is and what it does. Some have suggested that business intelligence is one of the world's best oxymorons. My favorite is government efficiency. Anyone here from the government department? I used that line in Ottawa, and there was this deathly silence that came over the room, and I suddenly realized where I was. Oh, I'm in trouble now. Mr. Carter, Revenue Canada calling. They're being audited. We'll talk about Cognos' role and our position within the BI marketplace. Then we'll look at applying business intelligence. We'll talk about putting it over top of existing applications briefly, but what we're going to focus in on is the role of business intelligence in a data warehouse environment. I mean, very simply, at the risk of sort of giving away everything I'm talking about, it makes a lot of sense to build a data warehouse, but don't forget, you've got to get the information out. You can build the greatest warehouse ever. If the users can't get the information out, it's really not much value, is it? So we'll spend time talking about that. I'll introduce you to the tools, and then we're going to show them to you. So first of all, what is business intelligence? The definition I'm going to give you, I've introduced a number of times as being very dry and academic. I then found out it came from one of our senior technical people, and I still think it's very dry and academic. That being said, it's empowering all employees with technology to access and analyze corporate data easily and efficiently. Nothing new, right? Software companies have been telling you that for the last 10 or 12 years, really since the advent of the PC. But what's different today is all. And we'll talk about some of the pitfalls that that we've fallen into over the last dozen years as attempts have been made to get information out to each and every user in the organization. I prefer the next definition. It speaks more to the impact on the organization than sort of this dry and rather academic definition. It also shows some foresight on the part of Gartner Group, because they came up with this definition 2 years ago. And they defined BI by its use, and as I say, its impact on the organization. I'll read that for those of you at the back who might not be able to see that. They said by 1996, use of business intelligence solutions will shift dramatically away from dedicated analysts to all managers and professionals as a preferred way of understanding the business. Instead of a small number of analysts spending 100% of their time analyzing data, all managers and professionals will spend 10% of their time using BI software. What it's about is, instead of going to a programmer to write you a new report, instead of going to a financial analyst or a marketing analyst or a sales analyst to do the analysis for you in Excel or in DBase or what have you, it's getting the tools on the desktops and the laptops of anyone involved in the decision-making process, delivering their data to them and allowing them to go in and manipulate it the way they choose. Because the way they choose is going to vary not only from day to day, it's probably going to vary from question to question that they pose to the information. Go. So very quickly, business in the 90s. Again, this is nothing earth-shaking. This is probably stuff that you're dealing with on a daily basis. The fact is, decision-making is becoming more and more complex for each and every one of us, regardless of what business we are in. Most organizations have gone through some sort of business process re-engineering or an aim of some sort, whether it's downsizing, right-sizing, upsizing, whatever the case may be. Right along with that has been the fact that we're dealing with shorter product life cycles and more sophisticated customers. I think this one is very true. I think all of our customers are becoming much more demanding in terms of the knowledge that you can give to them, whether it's how much they're buying from you, what their buying cycles look like, or why your product is different than the next one. They're demanding more. So we have to be prepared to deliver more to them. And one of the things we can deliver more of to them is good information. And of course, the only constant today is change. The question I ask today of my information is not the question I'll ask tomorrow. Guaranteed. So at the same time, as the complexity of making decisions has increased, so too has the demand for access to corporate data. People want more and more information. They want it delivered faster and easier. Now, I mentioned that the concept of delivering information to knowledge workers, decision makers, end users, pick your term, is nothing new. And in fact, over the last dozen years, the landscape has littered with companies that have attempted to do so and have failed, ultimately have failed. Some of the tools that you've seen and are familiar with are ad hoc reporting tools. Well, the problem there is that they tend to be technical in nature. They're fine for someone who understands how a database fits together, that you have to do a join between tables, and, well, I mean, they can figure that out. The average end user doesn't have the time, nor I would suggest to you the inclination to learn something of that nature. They want something that's point and click simple. What do you mean I have to do a join? What do you mean that's what is a Cartesian product? Right? They don't want to be worried with that. Executive information is a concept that's been around for a long time. There were companies that made an awful lot of money back in the mid-'80s with solutions that carried awfully big price tags on them. And you know, most of those companies are still around today. The difference is that they shrunk their code down from a host-based system to a PC-based system and tried to tell you it was a new product. The fact is that they are very costly when it comes to development and implementation, and they don't offer the flexibility required for the knowledge worker on a day-to-day basis. So what tended to happen with EISs was, I mean, they were called that for a reason, they only got out to the executives, they only made it to Mahogany Row. It's just too expensive and too time-consuming to deliver them past that. Decision support tools came along. Pretty much the same pitfalls as EIS. In fact, those two tended to be coupled together a lot. Just very costly to develop these. You had to program the functionality, which strikes me as an oxymoron, or program the flexibility, which also strikes me as an oxymoron. And query tools, which tended to be very limited in functionality. So how do you pull that all together? Because the fact is, a business worker, a knowledge worker today, needs an aspect of each one of those, but needs it delivered in one architecture, one interface, and allows it to bounce back and forth and through those different modes of access to information. So that's what we're about, is delivering business intelligence to the user by providing all of those capabilities, query, ad hoc, and standard reporting for that matter, decision support, EIS functionality, but delivering it to everybody. Providing access and analysis of the data being accessed to anyone in the organization, whether they're an executive, a frontline manager, a cost accountant, a sales analyst. Doesn't matter. Deliver the information that they need to them via tools that are easy to use and understand. Obviously, there's some key points that need to be adhered to, I think, for getting this out there to the mass of users. Because again, the payback on building a data warehouse and then unleashing that warehouse, or unleashing the users into the warehouse, is not having 10 people accessing the warehouse, right? It's having everybody, whether it's 100, 1,000, 10,000. That's really where the payback comes, is when you get everybody doing it. So there are some keys. First of all, the solution's got to be usable. And I would suggest to you that probably Microsoft Office represents the standard right now in terms of usability. That's an environment that most users are comfortable with. And I mean, if your Lotus Smart Suite or whatever Corel's is called now, as opposed to Microsoft Office, the presentation is essentially the same, right? In terms of how it presents data, how it presents functionality. So it's got to be that kind of interface, a true Windows interface. And it should integrate, by the way, with anything else you're running under Windows. Solution's got to be scalable. Some users need access to a very small set of highly summarized data. Other users need access to a lot of data that spans the organization, maybe goes down to deeper and deeper levels of detail. So you've got to be able to scale the solution based on number of users from small to large and based on data volumes. And as well, you've got to be able to take it across the organization and up and through the organization. You should also be able to deliver fast results. And we will tell you that an implementation of our tools will deliver positive results to your organization somewhere between 30 and 90 days from initiation of the project. We did a project with H.J. Heinz, who, ironically enough, are headquartered a few floors up above us. It's real tough trying to prepare an expense account and try to figure out how to expense 8 floors in the elevator. It doesn't work very well. Anyway, we signed a deal with them on the last day of our fiscal year in February 28th of '95. And one of the requirements was that on May 6th, we had to deliver the sales and marketing analysis application via PowerPlan and Promptu to their 180 sales reps and managers at their national sales conference in Whistler. We delivered 60 days. That's the kind of impact we can have on your organization. Lastly, you've got to look at the cost of ownership and look beyond just license fees. I mean, first of all, PowerPlan and Promptu are priced as PC-based software, so they're already sort of in that ballpark, but look at the total cost of implementation. License fees, support, training and education, implementation costs, and look at your own internal maintenance costs, and factor that all in. So let me tell you a little bit about Cognos. First of all, in the market space defined as business intelligence, Gartner Group defines it, Forrester Group, Meta Group, and so on, we're the fastest growing provider of these types of tools. The graph you see there represents our business intelligence revenues only, not total company for Cognos. We do have a traditional application development tool side of the business. Over the last 4 years, our revenues have been $6 million, $16 million, $42 million, $94 million. It's pretty impressive growth. It makes us the fastest growing provider of these tools. By the way, we're also now the biggest provider of these tools. Total company, $208 million in revenue last year. This year we'll do almost $200 million from BI revenues. Total company will be between $250 and $300. We have
That chart looks like your stock, too.
Thank you. And for those of you
Not
who
as generous as your stock, it's good.
well, I mean, the stock has pretty much done the same thing. For those of you interested, the stock closed yesterday at $37.20 on TSE. That's after a 3-for-1 split, by the way. So effectively, we're trading at about $105 Canadian. 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, we were at $8. And my next set of options are too. That's right. You know, if I was connected to the land, I'd have the stock coming up as we go. We have over 300,000 users worldwide. That's individual users. That represents somewhere in the neighborhood of 12,000 different organizations who are using the software. We do operate worldwide. We are a Canadian company, by the way. There's a reason we trade on TSE. We also trade on NASDAQ. We are headquartered in Ottawa. We also maintain a dual headquarters in the Boston area. That is considered worldwide sales and marketing headquarters. It's also the U.S. headquarters for Cognos Corp, which is wholly owned by Cognos Incorporated in Ottawa. And it also makes it look like we've got a U.S. head office for American companies. 45 offices throughout the world, in partnership in other countries. In total, we're represented in something like 80 countries throughout the world. That number has increased. We're back up to about 1,100 employees. And we've been in business for, actually now it's 26 years, which may not be a long time to some of you based on the industry you're in, but it's an awful long time in this industry. Okay, and again, just re-emphasizing our rapid growth, something like 133% year over year. Again, about 12,000 customers now. This number is a bit out of date. That should be 300,000 plus users, and a number of certified partners, resellers, and OEMs throughout the world. Everybody familiar with the Gartner Group? Okay, this is a grid that they update on a quarterly basis. And what they do is they plot vendors in the BI market space based on the combination of completeness of vision. So where are they taking them? What's the product look like and where are they taking it? What are their plans and directions for it? And their ability to execute on that vision. And we consistently occupy the top right-hand corner. So if you hear someone talking about Gartner on top right, this is the grid it's referring to. And let me add to that a very told you I'd lose something. This says Joseph Farley, UBS Securities. They're a stock trader and analyst out of New York, and this is his report. Cognos' impressive growth and especially the deal should put to rest any remaining skeptics. The company was once viewed as a perennial underdog in the marketplace. These guys are real. These guys are the market leader. There's no question about that. We are the market leader, no matter how you measure it. Let's talk about how we apply BI. We'll go quickly through extending the use of applications or the payback on applications, and then we'll focus in or narrow in on the data warehouse. Whenever a new application gets built, there's some instant payback as a result of that when it gets implemented, because suddenly information is being collected. Maybe there's some new information that's being collected in the application, but probably there are some new standard reports. So initially, this is our value grid or our payback axis. Just by collecting this new information, there's a pretty steep rise in payback. But what happens is you hit a wall, because those new standard reports of the new standard application only answer questions for so long, and what happens, the users start asking for more reports and new reports. And they're not asking for information that doesn't exist. I mean, the information exists. It's probably being delivered in one way, shape, or form through a standard report, but they just want to see it brought together differently. So we hit a wall, the access gap. And there's two ways to proceed from there. You kind of make do by continuing to write new reports off the application, but then you're still in the traditional application development curve, or you implement BI tools to keep the payback curve going. Otherwise, you drop off. Now, what we've done is partnered with a number of leading application vendors to give you sort of a head start on this and get that payback curve going quickly. And we're talking about folks like Oracle, SAP, and PeopleSoft, sort of the top tier, if you will. So the next group down, Coda, Dun & Bradstreet, Princeton Financials, American Software, and so on. And we continue to add more and more vertical and specific applications to that list. Actually, one that's missing there that should be there is Hyperion. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on applications. Let's move over to the data warehouse side of the ledger. And at the risk of, I'm sure, re-emphasizing some of the things that Lance talked about, why do you build a data warehouse? It's to get information out to the users. The best way to get information out to the users is through BI tools, specifically through Power Platform and Prompt. So the objective of the warehouse is to create an architecture which puts information, corporate information, in easy reach, easy access by end users. And then our tools come in to provide the access to the data and the analysis to anyone involved in the decision-making process. I mean, a data warehouse and business intelligence tools aren't just for management. Everybody needs information today. Again, whether it's sales rep, a cost accountant, a marketing analyst, everybody needs information to help them do what they're doing better. Now, undertaking a warehouse is not a trivial task. In fact, and what I'm losing here is this is a study from the Meta Group. If you look at the average cost to deliver a warehouse, now I'm talking like a full-blown warehouse. We're not talking a data mart right now. We'll get into that. But the average cost and the time for to deliver it is 3 years and $3 million US. What I'm going to suggest is there's a way to ramp up to that to start providing payback sooner, rather than waiting for the entire great warehouse in the sky to be built. So what I want to suggest to you, and again, Lance, you probably talked about data marts, right? I was pretty sure. Really what a data mart is a functional data warehouse. The other term that I'm starting to hear used often is subject area. What it is a subset, if you will, of the great data warehouse in the sky. It's a subset that's function specific or department specific. So maybe it's sales, maybe it's finance, manufacturing, personnel, whatever is of immediate and most concern to you. Whatever area hurts the most, whatever group of users is yelling at you loudest. Everybody here technical? Throw an IS.
No.
No? Some users? From what area? What department?
I'm a bar, but I'm not
Okay.
technical.
Okay. I mean, the fact is that there are, delivering better information to the end user community in any department has payback, but there are probably some that are more highly leveraged than others. Our experience has been the area that tends to be addressed first is sales and marketing. However, in terms of payback, there's some very real advantages to taking this approach, to going subject area by subject area or department by department. That is, first of all, ultimately, it will be a lower development cost. You should bite off a manageable piece at a time. You tend not to get sort of swamped in the grand visions. The old story about it's tough to remember your primary objective was to drain the swamp when you're up to your behind in alligators. Much faster deployment. Now, instead of telling the user community in general that, well, it's going to be 2 to 3 years down the road, and you can say, okay, sales and marketing, you're first, finance, you're second, HR, you're third, and that's no statement on what you should do first, by the way. And certainly increase user satisfaction. Because the other thing that starts happening, whenever you implement new technology, you get some reluctance from users, right? There are always some users that are sort of like, well, why should I do this? You've always written my reports for me. One of the things that will happen as you implement groups at a time is peer pressure. You start, let's say, with sales and marketing. Finance starts seeing what's happening. They hear good feedback from people in sales and marketing, and they're saying, when are we out? Are we next? Do us next. So you get buy-in even before you start the project. And that's very powerful. That will happen, assuming you've done a good job implementing the warehouse and the tools for your first subject area. Pardon me. This next grid is kind of an interesting one. And again, we're going to plot value delivered to the corporation on this axis. And I apologize, this one's been cut off. It says amount and cost of data delivered. So if we assume we're starting from ground zero, we're delivering nothing to the users to the point where we're going to deliver to them 100% of anything they ever dreamed they'd access. Everything they ever wanted is being delivered. Any guesses to what the payback curve looks like? Value back to the corporation, return on investment. On this axis, 0 to 100% delivery of information on this axis. What's it look like? Solid line, curve this way, concave curve. Yeah, you got it. Looks like this. Maybe it's Peter Drucker's old 80-20 rule of work, but there's a spot, and it's somewhere around 20 or 25% of data. If you deliver that, it's the right 20 or 25%, you're going to answer most of your end users' questions, most of their requirements for information. And once you go past that, there's still value, but the curve rises nowhere near as steeply, and you'll probably reach a point where it's a lot of diminishing returns at work. We call that the sweet spot. It's where value and cost is sort of optimized. The payback is optimized. And typically that's what the data looks like. It's a multidimensional cube. And what it represents for each and every user are their critical success factors or key performance indicators delivered to them in a multidimensional structure that corresponds to those pieces of the business which they manage. And again, if we refer back to sales and marketing, because it happens to be one that's comfortable for me to work in, when you think of it, what is it you look at? I mean, you look at sales, and you look at costs, and you look at margins, and ultimately what you want to know is profitability. Well, you sell things over time, and you sell things, and you sell them to someone. Well, there's 3 dimensions in your multidimensional model already. Time, products, customers. And there'll probably be more. There'll be distribution channels, and internal structures, and whatever else you want, but that's basically the intro to how this all works. Okay, so it's delivering the most critical information to each individual responsible for the overall process of the organization. So this is kind of a complete roadmap. Right now you've got certainly operational data sources, and the fact is, down here that says Cognos Business Intelligence Technology, we can plug in anywhere you want. We can plug in today simply by pulling stuff out of your operational data sources and dropping it into cubes, multidimensional cubes for each user. Or you might want to create an enterprise cube and access there and also spin off individual cubes. You may want to go the data mart approach, or you may want to go, or have already initiated, the approach back here, the complete information warehouse. Doesn't matter, we can plug in and work with you anywhere, and we'd love to plug in and work with you starting back here with Beamer. So that being said, let me introduce you to the tools, Impromptu and PowerPlay. First of all, just from a purely technical perspective, Impromptu is a query tool. It goes against relational and relational-like data sources. Direct access to most of the popular databases out there, and ODBC support for those who don't have direct access to. But what it allows a user to do, and I'm not going to go into great detail describing it, Doug can show you pictures worth 1,000 words, I guess. What it allows a user to do is interrogate business structures in a Windows presentation of data. They don't need to know the table structures. They don't need to know how joins happen. That's embedded in something called a catalog, which holds all the instructions about what the database looks like and how the data comes together. A user simply opens up folders and picks fields that he or she wants from a set of folders. And underneath, as they click their way through selecting things, the appropriate SQL is getting generated, complete with the appropriate joins. A bad join cannot be done in Impromptu. And there's two kinds of bad joins, by the way. Everyone's familiar with the runaway join or Cartesian product join or query from hell, as it's often referred to by IS people. But there's a second kind of join, that's an ambiguous join. To get into complex database schemas, you may have a situation where a user is selecting information from table A and from table D. But those are joined through B and C, and in fact there's more than one way that join could occur. In traditional query tools, the user hasn't picked the fields in a way that makes the join happen correctly, they'll get data back. Now, if you get data back from a query tool, you're going to assume it's right, aren't you? You can't be wrong. I requested this, I got it. Well, Impromptu forces in the definition of the catalog that any ambiguous joins be specified. So this is the way the join must be done. So you're always guaranteed the right results, and a Cartesian product or runaway join will not occur. PowerPlay, on the other hand, is the tool for those analyzing those multidimensional cubes that I talked about, that sweet spot of information that corresponds to the 80-20 rule. What it provides is a graphical environment in which a user can go in and offline, by the way, they're not issuing an SQL query now to the database, they're offline, it can be on the LAN, it can be on their C drive for that matter. They're now going against this multidimensional cube, which has been optimized for drilling up and down through summary levels of detail, slicing through the information to look at it from different perspectives. It literally allows a user to carry on a graphical conversation with their data. So that when they answer one question and a second question comes up as a result of answering that first one, they can explore it immediately. So let's start with Impromptu and just give you a little bit of insight into it. Again, it's an interactive query and reporting tool for deployment to 1 to 1,000 to 10,000 users. The amount of administrative work does not increase geometrically as you add users. In fact, it starts with the additional work, I don't know, inverse logarithmic, I don't know. My degrees in math, I can't remember any of that stuff. But 1,000 users does not take 1,000 times the effort that it does to administer one. We've provided significant administrative tools to allow a very small team, in fact it's often one person, to administer the entire Impromptu environment. Again, what it does is present business groupings of data to a user, regardless of how many tables or how complex the joins are that that data is coming from. It allows you to very simply present information to users. A sales folder, an inventory folder, a customer folder, and so on. Open up, grab the fields you want, it goes and gets them for you. Native access to databases, again, popular ones, Oracle, Sybase, SQL Server, and Formex, ODBC support for a wide variety of others. The key with Impromptu is finding the right balance. I mean, you need to give users unlimited flexibility to get at information, but it's unlimited flexibility only under certain controls, i.e. they only get at the data that they're allowed to see, and they're only allowed to do certain things within the database. So it's sort of managed unlimited flexibility, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Impromptu has been extremely successful. In fact, it was named Product of the Year for 1995 in the Query and Reporting Tools category by InfoWorld magazine. And I'm losing most of the text down at the bottom. That award came out in January of this year. PowerPlay, also an award winner, received an IT Award of Excellence from PC Week in the EIS DSS category. It is the leading multidimensional data analysis tool available. There are 200,000 users of PowerPlay worldwide, ranging in scope from 1 or 2 partner companies up to, somebody like Procter & Gamble with 8,000 users, Chrysler with 2,000 users, and so on. So there are a lot of instances of customers with literally thousands of users. That's a little out of date. Again, now it's at 200,000 seats installed. What PowerPlay will do is take incoming flat data, and you can set this up as a regular process, as a batch process to service multiple users that take in flat data and build multidimensional structures from it. Again, so that each time a user wants to do a drill down, they're not issuing an SQL query to the warehouse. It deals with data that has a periodicity to it. So you may be refreshing your multidimensional environment in PowerPlay daily, weekly, monthly. It's really how often you refresh that summary reporting environment. But again, you set that up to run as a regularly scheduled process when the books close and those cubes are waiting for the users. It's not like they have to produce it when they need it. It's there for them and it's current as of the end of the reporting cycle. Like Impromptu for that matter, complete Windows interface, all point and click. So if you use Excel, if you use Lotus, if you use Word, anything you've learned how to do in Windows, point and click, drag and drop applies here. And in PowerPlay and Impromptu, where there are standard icons for things under Windows, we've used those icons. Really what PowerPlay is for is to enable a user to understand what it is that's driving their business within their area of responsibility. What are the factors and how do they combine? Again, to go back to sales and marketing, ultimately what any organization that is implementing PowerPlay for sales and marketing is doing is trying to drive profitability analysis down to the product and customer level. So it's pretty powerful if you can analyze things and say, you know, we're selling this much product to this customer, but we're not making any money on it. Why are we doing it? We tend to be revenue driven in sales and marketing as opposed to profitability driven. And very few organizations, up until the implementation of our tools, have actually been able to do a proper profitability analysis down to that level. So what our tools provide in terms of business intelligence is the ability to combine the power that you got sitting in your corporate data, both in your warehouse data marts and in your multidimensional data, which just needs to be transformed to multidimensional, with productivity and the flexibility of true Windows tools. But the key is not for a select group of users, but for everyone in the organization. This is just a quick grid to show you how some organizations have gone about implementing this approach and the areas that they started with in terms of the multidimensional cubes. Glaxo Wellcome here in Canada, MCI, Epson, Avon, Plains Canada, and so forth. Now, in every organization, ultimately they're moving towards building a total and comprehensive warehouse. But what they've done is bit off pieces at a time to get information out quickly and start getting the payback from these applications. And actually, rather than going into the success stories in lieu of timing, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Doug. If we've got time at the end and you want to hear about some of our clients, and maybe Lance and I will put our heads together and come up with a couple of joint clients, we can do that just sort of off the cuff at the end. So then what I'll do is turn it over to Doug and get into the tools. Any questions on Cognos or on the tools?
Data that Steve was talking about into the multiple dimension data cube that the end user will interrogate. And that transformation is done according to the specifications the administrator places in the model. The end user's environment is depicted by the pink rectangle. Notice that for multiple dimension analysis, the end user is disconnected from the live database. So when they're doing those intense slicing and dicing, drilling down features, they're not impacting the live database. If you were to try to do multiple dimension analysis against a live database, one or two users would drag it to its knees. The reason is that this data cube is query optimized. It's designed to provide multiple dimension data very quickly to the PowerPlay product. PowerPlay will let your end users have a top-down view of the business. They'll be using that query optimized extract, and the kinds of reporting they're doing is called multiple dimension analysis. Let's see. Just going to escape out of that. And I'm going to start up PowerPlay. So I'm an end user now. I'm going to use PowerPlay. And it's a Windows tool. So I'm going to use standard window interface. what I'd like to do is to create a new document, and to do that, I can either click on the New button, or pull down the File menu and click on New. When I do that, I have to identify what information I'm going to be using when I create my document. So here's a data cube here. So I'll select that one. One thing you notice about PowerPlay is this line across the top here. This is the dimension line. This represents all the qualitative aspects of the business that we can explore. And if I just point to the years category, you can see we've broken down years into 95, 96. Within years, there's quarters. Within quarters, there's months. The products dimension breaks down into product lines. Within that, product types. If you actually click on one of these, you can see how the thing breaks down. Our locations are broken down into continent, within continent by country, within country by branch code. The last thing on the dimension line is our measures list. We can be looking at revenue, costs, profit percent, etc. So those are the actual numbers we're looking at, and it defaults to the first one in the measure list. So we're looking at revenue numbers. You'll notice that sometimes I move my pointer around, it changes to a plus sign. Wherever there's a plus sign, there are details that can be explored simply by double-clicking. So if I point to 1996, okay, double-click, I'm now looking at quarters within 1996. Imagine there's a 1 in front of each of those numbers as there is on my screen. So I've just drilled down a level in the first dimension, and notice that the dimension line has changed to keep track of where I am. So I'm now focused on 1996 data. If I double click on Q3, I'm now looking at July, August, and September. So I've just gone down another level in my year's dimension. And the dimension line is keeping track of where I am. These three lines here add up to the revenue totals at the bottom. There's a little plus sign, it's a little subtle on the overhead here, but there's a little arrow pointing up, indicating that I can drill up by double-clicking at that point. So if you double-click on the total, you're going up a level. So I double-click on Q3 total. Q3 becomes one of my detail lines. If I double-click on the total again at the bottom for 1996, I've gone back up to the highest level. There's a pointer for outdoor products. If I double-click on the plus sign for outdoor products, I can see the details that make up my outdoor product sales. Obviously, I'm selling, the mountain equipment co-op kind of products here: tents, backpacks, camping stoves, etc. And these are the various product types within the outdoor products line. If I drill down on backpacks by double-clicking, I can see the individual models of backpacks that we're selling. And each of those columns adds up to the total on the right. If I double-click on backpacks here, I've drilled up a level back to outdoor products. The dimension line is keeping track of where I am. Double-click again, and I'm back to the total. There's three basic techniques you can use in PowerPlay. They are drilling down, as I've just shown you, change of display, and something called slicing and dicing. Slicing and dicing is the term used to refer to multiple dimension analysis. Changing display is easy enough. Just pick the display type you want. Okay, you can have your 3D bar graph, a regular clustered bar graph, stacked bar graph. We've got scatter graphs, line graphs, correlation graphs where you can have bars with lines going through them. All sorts of different display formats. You pick the one that's appropriate for the analysis that you're doing. I like the pie graph, so I'm going to use it. As I move my pointer around, it changes to a plus sign. The functionality I showed you earlier, drilling down and up in the crosstab, is available in any of the display formats. So I point to outdoor products and double-click, and I'm looking at the product types within the outdoor products product line. If I double-click on my tents slice here, I can see the individual models of tents that I'm selling. To drill up, I would double-click here in the legend. So tents is now one of my detail slices within the outdoor products pie, and I can double-click to go back to the top level. Now to do some real multiple dimension analysis, we're going to have to start combining more dimensions into what we're doing. What I'd like to do is find out if we're making any money. I'm going to take my margin range dimension and actually drag it down into the pie, so my various margin ranges become slices. I'm dragging it down into the pie, and when I let go, my slices change to show me the relationship between the sales in the various margin ranges. We have a lot of normal margin range sales and a significant number of high margin sales within 1995. I'm going to scroll back to all years. A very, very small amount of low margin sales, and that's good for my business. I'd like to see a little more detail about these high margin sales, the over 65% ones. Now I point there and there's no plus sign, but I can double click anyway to isolate my over 65% in the dimension line. So I've just drilled down into my big blue pill. What I can do now is see who is making those high margin sales and what products are being sold. To find out who's doing those sales, I drag the location dimension into my graph, and I can now see the breakdown of my high margin sales by region. There's a significant number of high margin sales in North America, so I can double click there to drill down. Significant number of high margin sales in North America. I double click to drill down yet again. Notice the dimension line is keeping track of where I am. I'm looking at high margin sales made by the United States sales force. Significant number of high margin sales here. If I click on the slice, it breaks it out and scrolls the legend so that I can find out what category that is. So I'm looking at Dallas. I can double click on Dallas. And I found out that Dallas has one sales rep making all these high margin sales in that region. So I'm going to double click there. There's no plus sign, but I do that to isolate Bill Gibbons' high margin sales in the dimension line. Multiple dimension analysis lets me combine another dimension into my analysis. Let's see what Bill's selling. I drag my products dimension down into the pie, and I see one actual pie. Everything in that high margin sales is in the environmental line. I can double click to drill down, and I see a lot of them are water purifiers. Double click there. So I'm now looking at water purifiers sold by Bill Gibbons that were in the high margin range. Now this is really good for my business, because now I know, first of all, who's doing well, so I can compensate them accordingly, give them a big pat on the back. And I know what products are selling well in the high margin ranges, water purifiers. So from a business perspective, I know what to sell, and I know who's selling it. If I want to know to whom these are being sold, I would take my channels dimension and drag it down into the pie. And it looks like the significant number of high margin sales is right here, being sold to the Go Sport line. Suppose I want to go back to the live database now and actually see the sale transactions. There's a hook from PowerPlay into Impromptu that allows me to do that. So while I clicked on Sport Chain, I point to the button up here. This button here is the drill through button that will actually start up an Impromptu report that will take what I've selected here, Sport Chain, as well as the current contents of the dimension line to create a filter for an Impromptu report. So I click this button now. I'm actually going to the live database to find out what the information is. Now the report I'm running in Impromptu depends on the measure I was looking at. I was looking at revenue, so I'm going to get a report that was designed for that purpose. I'm interrogating the live database now with Impromptu. If I just scroll around, you can see this report. So I have more detailed information about who these customers are, these sport chains. If I switch my measure to quantity and drill through again, I'll get a different report. Impromptu is now going to show me the actual detailed sale transactions, the dates that they were made, Okay, so here's my Bill Gibbons sale on a certain date to a certain customer. Here are the actual products that were sold. They're both water filters. And here's the quantities that were shipped. So PowerPlay is giving you that top-down view of your business. Start at the top, you work your way down using multiple dimension analysis and drill down techniques. You get to a point where you feel you need to interrogate the live database for the actual transactions themselves and use the drill through functionality to do that. The power of that is this. When you do go to the live database for details, you are not looking at the world. You are only looking at that very small segment of your business. So your database only takes the hit for that certain time frame from your dimension line, that one sales rep, those few products. Okay, you don't have to search through your whole database and hundreds of pages of information for what you're looking at. Okay, any questions about what you've seen in the with this aspect of PowerPlay so far? Yes?
Can you take these charts and put them into a presentation package?
Yep. PowerPlay version 5 is an Ole client, an Ole server, and I believe it's an Ole client as well. By the way, PowerPlay 5 came out last week. My first time using it was yesterday. So not a high learning curve and getting used to working with these products. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to create, yes?
Could you do that, so like the picture you had there, could you do a comparison against another region or another sales rep and have the two simultaneously?
Another region, okay. PowerPlay is a multi-document processor, so I can actually open up or create another PowerPlay report and tile them horizontally. So these two reports are disconnected from each other. They're two completely separate documents, so I can go anywhere with either document. We also have the ability within a single document to bring up another display type. I've seen this done once. Let's see if I can actually
Yeah, I did
do
it for
it.
the first time yesterday.
What is it?
Yeah.
Add display?
Uh-huh.
Thank you. So I'm now looking at the pie and the crosstab, and these displays are tied together. So if I drill down on Sport Chain here, the crosstab that supports that will follow. So you can have it either way.
And Doug, have you used Reporter in 5.0 yet?
Well, there's a first time for everything.
Right. Well, I wasn't necessarily suggesting you do, but in
Well, I'm a risk taker. I'll go for
okay,
it.
you're better than me.
Okay, never use. What I've just shown you is a new report, and there's actually two types of documents you can create with PowerPlay. PowerPlay Explorer, an Explorer type report, which we just saw. As we drill down, it guides us through the hierarchy of our business. You can also create a Reporter type report, and when I do that, my crosstab comes out blank, and I can populate this crosstab with the categories I want. So let's say I want columns for years. I'll drag years up here and double click to get the years I'm interested in, and I can actually delete the columns I don't want and drag them around.
The reason I mentioned that is because that should go directly towards your question, being able to put different regions side by side and
Yeah.
compare them.
Okay, I'm looking for my Add Categories button. There it is. So let's say within, what was it? Within the North America region in the United States, you wanted to look at, from the Chicago region, this one, Bill. So we're looking at Bill's figures. And from the Europe region, we'll go into France and take all of Paris, let's say. Can't do that. No, not letting me do that. Not sure what's happening there. I don't know why I couldn't do that anyway. Okay, so click Add Row, and I get the row. So here's somebody from wherever I grab that one, and a completely different sales rep from some totally other different area of the business. More interesting type of report, though, is this. Let's say I take all my locations and indicate down here that I want the lowest level of detail from that dimension added as rows. So here's every single sales rep in the business. Now I want to rank them. I'm going to rank them based on their sales performance in 1995. I'm going to rank them all. I'm going to show the ranking category. So here's how they did in 1995. I'm going to go back to Explore and rank them again. This time I'm going to take the top 10 according to 1996. So here's my top 10 sales rep this year. Here's how they were doing last year. If I want to, I can even select the two ranking columns and subtract them, calculate the difference. I'll call this thing gain. So that gain column on the right represents how far up and down the list the sales reps have moved. All the other kinds of Windows functionality you expect to see, the fonts, borders, patterns, all that kind of nice looking stuff is available. We can also bring meaning to the report using what would otherwise be a cosmetic attribute. We can create what's called an exception rule that will show me, in using different colors, the people who've moved up the list versus the people who've moved down the list. So I select my rows, and I click on Highlight Exceptions. Okay. First time in version 5. Let's see if I can do this. Call this Doug's Rule. And any value from a minimum to, say, -1. Actually, I'll type in negative a big number. That should use a style called Bad News, which I think is a red font. Everybody who's moved up the list should be highlighted using Good News, which is a green font. And I want to drive that rule based on the gain column. Whoop. Apply, meant to click on Close, not Clear. Okay, so everybody who's moved up the list is now in a green font. Everybody who's moved down the list is now in a gray background with a red font. You can actually configure these styles so that they're bolder, or they print bigger, or they print with a teal background, or any sort of attribute that you feel is appropriate for highlighting this. The display formats available in a reporter-style report are the same as those that were available in the Explorer type. So you've still got your pies, your bar graphs, okay, clustered bar graphs, whatever is appropriate for the analysis you're doing. Any questions about the reporter style of reports? Okay. What I plan to do now is move into impromptu. But before I do that, what I'd like to do is show you how you might organize your documents. In the Windows environment, you can end up with hundreds of documents. It would be nice if there were a presentation mechanism to show you how those documents are organized. And we call that Portfolio. I'm going to start up Portfolio. Oh, that's the administrator I want playback. I'm starting up PowerPlay Portfolio to show you a way to organize your Windows documents. I'm opening up what's called a briefing book, and you can think of a briefing book as a document with many pages in it. And you can turn from page to page using these forward and backwards VCR control buttons. So that's another page, and I'm going back, I'm going back. You can also configure a portfolio page to have buttons that take you to other pages. So here's a button here. If I click on that, I'll go to my outdoor product sales. And on this page, we've got an OLE object pasted in here, just in a PowerPlay report, as well as some other buttons down below. I can go to my tents page, where we've got 2 objects, 2 reports. I can click on a report to bring it to the foreground. Double-clicking on the report actually starts up the tool that was used to create the report, so you can further analyze, drill down, slice and dice. Portfolio can be used to organize not just your PowerPlay reports, but your Microsoft Word documents and Excel documents and any of your other OLE compliant documents. If I go to sales by country, one thing you'll notice is when I point to Canada, there's a plus sign. That's what we call a hot area. A button doesn't have to be visible. It can just be hidden, and when you click on it, it takes you to another page. So here I'm on my Canada slide. I can go back to sales by country into my USA slide. Double click on California, and I'm onto my California page, actually looking at documents. You can actually organize hundreds and hundreds of documents using this technique into one very simple presentation mechanism. You might have a month-end portfolio document. At month-end, you come in, you open up your portfolio document, and it's automatically updated with all the displays from the cubes and the reports and the spreadsheets that were produced for that reporting period. Any questions on the portfolio tool? Okay. Just to switch over to Impromptu now. Just a couple of slides to show you how that works. Impromptu is a tool that will give us access to the live database. So we're going to be looking at live database details this time. If you've ever used any other database reporting tool, you might have had to know something called SQL or SQL. It's a very cryptic and hard to use programming language. Impromptu will insulate you from having to know that. The administrator of Impromptu does not have to know SQL, and the end users of Impromptu do not have to know SQL or SQL as it's called. We've got a database and some end users, and we want to use Impromptu to give the end users access to that live database. The database knows SQL, and the user does not. Impromptu insulates the user from having to know anything about that live database, like CSTMR_TBL. Insulates the end user from that and presents sales information or employee information or production information. And it does that through the use of an Impromptu catalog. An Impromptu catalog is something the administrator sets up that cross-references the way the database looks at the world versus the way the end user looks at the world. Impromptu will give us a bottom-up view of the business. We're starting with detailed transactions now. We can create headings and footings. We're working with live data, whereas PowerPlay was the query-optimized extract. And we're producing reports that are transaction-oriented. We will not be doing multiple-dimension analysis in Impromptu. So I start up Impromptu. Double-click. And once again, a Windows paradigm to create a new document. I pull down the File menu and click on New. And I can indicate what kind of report I want to create. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. And I have to identify the catalog that I'm going to use. We're dealing once again with the Great Outdoors business. When I click OK, I've actually attached to the live database, whether it's Oracle or DBase or Sybase or whatever. To create my report, I use the contents of the catalog. The catalog is presented with a folder paradigm similar to what you'd expect in File Manager. And if I open up a folder by double-clicking, I can see the folder can contain other columns of information, and it can contain other folders. So you can organize the information hierarchically in these folders. A folder might also contain something like this. There's a funny little symbol here. Perhaps I can focus that in a bit better. That symbol there indicates a calculated column. The database actually doesn't have something called sale amount. It has quantity and it has unit price. The impromptu catalog can capture the calculation of sale amount so that your end users can reuse that calculation without continually having to specify that. If there's a calculation they need to do that is not in the catalog, they can do that just by clicking on the Calculate button. The catalog can also store conditions, so the end user doesn't have to remember what the definition is of a sale that closed on time. It might be a complex comparison of 30 different columns. If the administrators captured that in the catalog, everybody will be using the same condition, so there's no mistakes, and the end user doesn't have to know how to generate that complex condition. The report I want to create is one for products. I'd like my product type on the report, so I'll double click on that. Product line. I also like to see the individual product. And from my sales and history folder, I'd like to see sales 94 and 95. Now I don't have to be aware of what physical tables those came from. This might be my product master, this might be some kind of a sales history table. I also don't have to know what the original database column names are. I believe that one's actually called prod code. It's end user friendly names here. To run my report, I click OK. When I click OK there, it is at that moment that the SQL is generated and sent to the database. So the administrator of the product is not predefining all these queries. The program required to interrogate the database is generated at runtime when you click OK. So the database has sent back this information. Now I didn't really want all this. I only wanted to look at the outdoor products. I've got some outdoor products and some Go Sport line, etc. So to filter on outdoor products, I'll just select one of them, doesn't matter which one. And when I point to this coffee filter up here, it tells me that's the filter button. When I click on it, it's going to filter down the report, so I'm only looking at outdoor products. And I can even delete this column if I don't want it. I select the column, hit the delete button on my keyboard. We call that direct manipulation of the data. You don't have a query specification dialog, you don't have, like over here, you don't have another one that says how to format the reporting and a third one to view the results. It's one integrated display environment. The information is a little bit out of order. I've got some sleeping bags here and some sleeping bags down there. If I want to group the information together, I'll select the column and click my group button. So I'm now grouped by product line. So I've done some filtering, I've done some grouping. If I want to do some column summaries, I select the columns I want, sales 94 and 95, and I can either count them or add them up. We support other metrics as well, minimize, maximize, standard deviation, those sort of things. But I now have column totals. So my backpack sales 94 adds up to this, my sales 95 to that, in my little footing area. Let's say I want to put some headings on my report now. I want a heading for each product line. I select one of my product lines and click on my heading button. If I scroll up, you can see the heading for backpacks, the total for backpacks, and the heading for cooking equipment. Now here's a really cool thing you can do. I want my totals in the heading. Impromptu does not force you to put your totals in the footing. What I can do is I can drag this total into the heading. Now if I had 3,000 backpacks, I got a long way to drag. What I would want to do instead is drag the total from backpacks into the heading for cooking equipment. Impromptu is smart enough to put the right total in the right heading, and they all get formatted properly. So my backpacks has the right total, so does my cooking equipment. I don't even need this footer anymore, so I'm going to delete it. The kind of Windows functionality you expect is available. Let's change the font here to Brush Script. I'll make the font bigger so people in the back can see it. Whoops, too big. Okay. A bit bigger. You can change the color. I'm not sure yellow is going to show up. No. You get the idea. You can put dollar signs in front of your numbers, drag them around. Put some nice formatting in the back there with patterns. Lime green.
What a combination.
Okay. You can get some nice stuff going if you have a little more taste than I do. There's some predefined styles too. I've selected 2 columns, and I can use the predefined styles such as dark embossed. Let me select the column in the middle now and do light embossed. Okay, so we've got dark embossed, light embossed. If you alternate your columns like that for a tab style report, it looks pretty nice. Any questions about what we've seen here?
Can you show us how a example of generating the catalog?
Can do that at the end. How many people here are interested in the administrative aspect of these tools? Raise your hand. A few people? Okay, I'm going to save that to the end so the people who aren't can leave, and I'll cover it then. Before we leave, though, the end user environment, I want to point out that this is a very deep product. I've shown you very simple filtering, very simple grouping, and column summaries. Under the original query, we have these tabs that can be used to do multiple level grouping, groups within groups within groups. We have the filter dialog. Here's product type equals outdoor products. That filter was generated when I hit that coffee filter button. But if I have a complex filter I need, I can say and then enter in a whole bunch of other criteria with parentheses, nested parentheses, ands and ors. You have all sort of functions available to you: date manipulation, time manipulation, string manipulation functions, database specific functions as well. You won't see any here because I'm connected to DBase files, but if you're connected to Oracle, you'll see Oracle functions. You can do summary filters. Summary filters are neat. That would allow me, for example, to produce a report of all my customers whose monthly sales are above the average of all customers' monthly sales. So you can, filter on those that are above average, below average, away from the standard deviation, that sort of thing. Impromptu is a frame-based reporting tool. We have frames within frames within frames. This is a data frame. That is a data frame. That's a heading frame. And the whole thing is inside this list style frame. I'm actually going to produce now another kind of report which has a form frame in it. And to do that, I'm going to use a predefined style of report, predefined template as we call, from this palette of my 6 favorite report templates. Prompto actually ships with over 70 different templates, and you can get to them by clicking on More or deselect Use Palette. You can actually browse through. There's a whole library of them. The one I'm interested in is this one here. This template will allow me to produce a ranked by grouping report. And a template often has things already in it. We call these things placeholders. This is not any specific information, it's just a placeholder. I can use this template to produce a top 10 employee report, a top 10 customer, or a top 10 products report, or a top 3 products report, or whatever. I'm going to do products. So the things I want to rank are products. So I'm going to double click on product, and that will be substituted into my first placeholder. I want my products grouped by product type, so I will double click on product type. And how I want them ranked is based on sales 95. I could have ranked them on anything, but I'll double click sales 95. When I do that, 2 other totals or 2 other summaries automatically appear as defined in the template. So I don't have to remember how to set all that up. It's done once in the template and everybody can use that template. The template is also designed with something called a type-in prompt. Every time I run the report, I have the option of typing in how many I want ranked within each group. Do I want top 10, top 5, top 3, whatever. I'm going to do the top 5. Click OK. By the way, any impromptu report you write, you can set up with these types of prompts. You can actually have pick lists. What customers? Pick from this list of customers. You can click, okay, I want the report for these 3 customers. And in the same dialog, you can type in the date range for the transactions you're looking at. Here's my list style report. I can see my sales 95. I've got what's called a chart frame in this area. I've got a list frame over here, similar to the report I created earlier. The whole thing is called a form frame. So this thing here, the entire report is a form frame. The thing about a form frame is in the top right you get these VCR control buttons. So I can go forward from one form to the next. Each form is for the environmental line or for a product line. So if I go forward, I'm looking at my Go Sport line, forward again, my outdoor products. And I can go back as well. Some of you may have noticed that we're seeing a bunch of pound signs in one of the fields. This template was not designed with enough room anticipated for the highest number of sales that we might have. Rather than show you truncated or incorrect information, Impromptu puts these little pound signs in to remind you that the column is too small. In a traditional reporting environment, you get on the phone, you call IS and say, could you please add another byte to this column, and 3 weeks later you get your report fixed. But Impromptu, things are a little different. I click on this column, and I drag it to the right, and I can now see my answer. So I scroll forward, I can see all of them are fixed. I can also configure that column for what's called dynamic width, and it actually floats, the width of the column floats according to the value that you see there. Any question on the use of templates? No?
When you talk about the catalog, so everybody understand how you get from Universe to Impromptu. Okay? And only different here when we're talking about PowerPlay, remember PowerPlay doesn't attach the actual data. So what you do is you feed PowerPlay some data source. Now that data source could be directly from Universe, it could be an ASCII table, it could be anything. The idea is it's a data source that you finalize that you want to use to build a model. But that can get a little more complicated. So I'm not going to spend that much time on that part. The only other thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm sure Doug will get it, he'll show you exactly how it works, but maybe outline it in a way to make it easier for you to understand. Again, you've got your Universe database out here, and it's got tables in it. Display, table B, table C. And all those tables have multi-dimensional columns and all those other kinds of things that we're used to. Well, when you use Hyperstar to create a catalog, it does something really cool called dynamic normalization. Big word, and all that means is, show me a way that I can translate these multi-values so that a SQL tool will know what in the world they are. And what it does, when it finds multi-values, it will appear to Impromptu that you may have more than the 3 tables you have here. You may actually end up with table A, table B, table C, and table D. But organized in a way that it has now taken to account the multi-values. So that when you create the catalog in Impromptu, which is a very simple process, and it's divided into 2 windows, one called the catalog and one called the database. So when I say I want to create a new catalog, and it says, well, what tables are you going to use? Well, it says, select all the tables that are in that VMark database that we talked about creating. And all those tables appear over here. And then you say, well, which ones do I want in the catalog? So you pick them. And click on an add button in here. And you just move the tables that you want. Once you have the tables in the catalog, the administrator then decides how you want those tables joined by saying, well, I want this column in this table joined to this column in this table, etc. And then once that's determined, then you create the folders that you want. And that's the folder paradigm is where the important piece of the Impromptu puzzle is. Because what you can do is pull whatever column that you want into whatever folders that you want. The folders don't have to be related to individual tables in any way. The way I like to view it is when you're creating catalogs for specific users, I like to have folders called Bob Stuff. And my Bob Stuff folder is another folder for Bob's annual report. And he has all his little things that he uses for, or she uses for that particular report. So that you can create a folder structure that's as unique or as generic as is efficient for your operation. It's not a very complicated process, it's very simple and straightforward. I just wanted you to understand how it related between Universe and Impromptu as opposed to other tools.
Lance, I just wanted to add, there was a comment back here when you were talking about the connection of Impromptu to the Universe database. Somebody said back here that that's using live data. It doesn't have to be. The database, if your data warehouse is in Universe, it could be connecting to a Universe data warehouse. Or you could connect to live data. So it's at your option. You could connect to
Let's see, the outdoors database, I actually have the definition there already. It says it's a set of DBase files for your Universe database. You
You
of course
use
would
ODBC
pick
gateway.
ODBC and select an appropriate data source. In his example, he had one called VMark. Outside the Impromptu environment, using ODBC administration is where the reference from VMark is satisfied back to the actual Universe database or your Hyperstar or whatever. I have to use DBase because that's what's on my PC. With DBase, I indicate the directory where my DBase files are located and everything's okay. Just cancel out of that. To create my catalog, I pull down the catalog menu, click on New. I specify the name of my catalog. A description that's end user friendly. And I specified the data source that I'm going to use. The database, I should say, was the outdoors database. Here's that split screen that he was talking about a moment ago. Here are all the tables available in the database, and on the right side is a list of the tables that I'm going to use in my catalog. I'm not going to do them all, I'll just put in a few.
Show them how to join order and order detail.
Yep.
You can do
I'll
both.
put in product, order detail, order, and customer.
Now, what would the file names look like for the nested tables that have been created during the normalization? How would they be named?
There would be a variation of the original name.
Okay, so if I had invoice detail buried in an invoices file and I had a group name on it called detail, would it come out invoices star detail or something like
Underscore,
that?
I think.
Underscore.
Underscore detail, but that's basically the scheme of how
Right.
it does the normalization.
And what's great about the way this particular window works, you'll notice the button under Add says Alias. So regardless of what it was, even from an administrative point of view, regardless of what it was in the database, when you create the catalog, you can make anything you want.
The aliasing is, once again, for administrators' use. Aliasing allows you to do something called a self-join. Let's say you've got a bill of material relationship or some kind of a recursive relationship in your database. You need to join a table to itself. With Impromptu, you can do that just by sticking the table in twice with different aliases and set up the business rules of how you get from one table to the next. The product table joins to the order detail table. And as I select that pair, I see product here, order detail over here. They are actually joined by product number. Click add link, and I get an equi-join on those two columns. If I pull this list down, you can see we support non-equi joins. And by clicking on one of these as an outer table, we support outer joins as well. If I select this one, product would become an outer table in any query that requires both of these tables. So you could produce a report of products for which there are no orders. We support multi-column joins as well. For example, maybe the status column had to join to the returned column as well. Okay, so both those columns must be equal in order to establish the business rule. We support that. Doesn't make sense in this environment. I'm going to remove that link. Also, you might have to do some massaging to get from the product number in one table to the product number in another. There might be a little P prefix in one table and not in the other. You can view the join as an expression. You're seeing a little pseudo-SQL fragment. Once again, you have access to all kinds of date manipulation functions, time manipulation, string manipulation functions, totaling, all that sort of stuff for your complex join rules. So that's product to order detail. Order detail joins to order by order number. Order's already joined to order detail. You only have to specify the one-way join, and it automatically does the other way. So order joins to customer by customer number. I'm not sure the yellow is showing up. That's a little skeleton key to remind you what's an index on that table. You don't have to join by indexes. Actually, you have to join according to what business rule makes sense. But if you don't see that little skeleton key, you know that that query might not be very efficient. So you might have to go back to the DBA and say, well, all our users are going to interrogate this table on Custno. It really ought to be an index in the customer table. Okay, click OK on that. Actually, in that joins dialog, just back there for a second, possible problems in the table join strategy you've entered, okay, which pretty much completes our description to the catalogers. If I go into folders, you can see some folders were set up automatically by Impromptu when we loaded the catalog. But these are very database oriented, real database table names here. If I double click that, you see real database column names. Well, what I'm going to do now is organize some folders from an end user perspective. I'm going to do that by clicking on New Folder, and I'll just create a folder for order information. What I'll do is I'll create a new calculation, and I'll call this amount. And that is the quantity, or the price, whatever, times quantity. So that's my amount calculation. You can see it's got that. Suppose the user puts order number on their report and nothing else. Impromptu knows it only has to access that one table. If the user puts order number and quantity on their report, Impromptu knows they're accessing those two tables. It then consults the table join strategy that we've set up to figure out all the table joins it needs to get from order to order detail. Your end user is going nuts against your database. So under the creator user, I'll add some more user classes, and these can be name specific, like I can set up one for Bob and one for Sally, or I can set up user classes. Let's set up accounting, and we can put passwords in here as well if we want. And underneath accounting, I can add clerk and supervisor. When I do that, clerk will inherit all the restrictions that I've placed on accounting, but I can further restrict clerk and supervisor independently. Under table access, I can say, for example, the supervisor should not have access to the customer table, so I'll deny access there. The supervisor should also not have access to the status of the order, so I'll deny access to that column. So it can be table or column specific restrictions. You can also deny access to certain folders. All these admin folders, they shouldn't have access to those. They should only be looking at, the end user folders that we created. Within a folder, you can also deny access to an individual column.
As you'll see, once he completes the catalog, it not only just denies you access, but you don't see that you've been denied access to something. It just doesn't exist. So as far as you're concerned, it never did exist.
Okay. Right, and that's true for the folder access. You might want to prohibit the user from sorting on index columns, so we'll prevent. You might not want them doing something called an outer join. Well, you might have to let them under certain circumstances, but we'll warn them when they do that. Steve mentioned something in his presentation about cross products. I've never seen a use for cross products, so the default is prevent. Please don't change that. Impromptu will do it, and you'll get a cross product.